A Bigfoot in 2026, walking on a trail camera. This was the title of the email I got with this footage.
It comes from the left, big and unhurried, and the moment its body crosses the sensor line, the camera kicks on and starts recording. 11 seconds? That is all we get. 11 seconds of something tall and covered in hair walking slowly across the frame in the middle of the night. It does not run, it does not flinch at the camera. As it crosses, it comes up against a tree in the foreground, close to the lens, one long arm and a hand against the trunk. And then it carries on, off to the right, out of frame, and the 11 seconds run out. That is the footage. And the man who set up that camera, the man who sent me this clip, has not answered an email in 3 weeks. I want to be careful here because this one is personal in a way most of the stories on this channel are not. The person who filmed this is not a stranger who posted it on a forum. He is someone I've been talking to for a long time, quietly, over email. He never wanted attention, never asked for anything, never tried to sell me a thing. He is the opposite of the guy who films a blurry shape and screams that he has proof. He is the careful kind. And this is not the first clip he has sent me. That is the part that has been sitting in my chest for weeks now. Because the last time we talked, he told me something that I have not been able to shake. He told me he had been watching them, more than one of them, for years, from a distance, always from a distance. And he told me they were changing.
I'm Alex, and the reason I am making this video instead of just sitting on those 11 seconds of footage is that he also told me what he was going to do next.
He told me he was going to stop watching from far away. He was going to go and find the place where they shelter, up in the mountains. He said he would be careful, and then he stopped writing back. Now, before we go any further, I want you to think about scale for a second, because this is the thing people never sit with long enough. North America has somewhere around 2 million square miles of forest. There are mountain valleys on this continent that no human being walks into in a given year. Not a hunter, not a hiker, not a logger, nobody. We have mapped the surface of Mars in higher resolution than we have walked some of the backcountry in our own hemisphere. So the question was never really whether something large could stay hidden out there. The honest question is what happens to the rare person who decides to stop watching it from a safe distance and walk toward it instead. So let me take you back to the beginning. Back to the first email he ever sent me, and the long, strange road that led to those 11 seconds of footage, and to the silence that came after. Let me tell you what I can about him, which is not very much, because that is the deal we made, and I intend to keep it. He is a private person with a real reason to stay private. He has the kind of life and the kind of work where being known as the Bigfoot guy would cost him something he is not willing to pay. He has trail cameras the way some people have a workshop or a fishing boat. It is a serious hobby, a years-long one, not a stunt. He knows his equipment, he knows his ground, and he is patient in a way that almost nobody is anymore. When he first reached out, it was not with a wild claim. It was with a careful, almost shy question about whether I thought a certain kind of footage was worth anything at all. And here's the part I have to say plainly once, so we can move past it and look at what actually matters. I cannot verify any of this for you. I cannot prove the clip is real. I cannot confirm his name, and I would not tell you if I could. He brightened the footage himself before he sent it because the original was nearly black, and that means what you are seeing has been processed. He would not tell me where this happened, not the state, not the region, not the mountain range. That was the condition for sharing it at all, and I agreed to it. So take all of this with a healthy pinch of salt. I am not here to tell you what to believe. I am here to show you what he showed me, and to tell you what he told me, and to be honest about the parts I cannot stand behind. That is the housekeeping. Now let us actually look at the thing. Because the more I sat with this clip, the more I realized the part that unsettles me is not really the creature at all. It is him. It is the arc of a careful man and what that kind of patience does to a person over years and where it finally led him. To understand the footage, you have to understand the person who spent a decade earning it. So let me tell you the rest of what I know in the order I came to know it. Run the clip again in your head because the details are where this either falls apart or gets under your skin.
It enters from the left, and the first thing that strikes you is that it is not in a hurry. Wild animals caught by a flash at night tend to do one of two things. They bolt or they freeze and stare into the light. This does neither. It just walks. The gait is what people always come back to with footage like this, and I understand why.
There is a smoothness to it, a roll through the hip and the knee, the arms swinging in a long, loose counter rhythm to the legs. The proportions are wrong for a person in the way that matters. The arms are long, the legs are long, the shoulders are absurdly wide, and the head sits low and forward on them, with very little neck to speak of. Then comes the moment with the tree. As it crosses, it comes right up against the trunk in the foreground, and you can see a hand on it, the fingers visible against the bark. And the hand is the thing that bothers me most, in the best way. The fingers are long. They look, for lack of a better word, like a hand. Not a paw, not a hoof, a hand. The feet read the same way, broad and long-toed where you can make them out. And then it moves on, off to the right, out of the frame. The whole pass is unhurried and deliberate. It does not bolt, it does not freeze and stare into the flash. It crosses, it pauses at the tree, it keeps going. It does not behave like something that wandered into frame by accident. It behaves like something that knows exactly where it is and is simply passing through. Now let me give the other side its full due because this channel does not exist to sell you on the easy answer. Everything I just described is also exactly what a tall, athletic person in a high-end costume would look like on a cheap night camera. The slow walk is what you do when you do not want to trip in the dark. The long arms can be extensions built into a suit. The brightening that lets you see the hands is also the single best way to hide the seams where a mask meets a neck, because lifting the shadows washes out exactly the detail that would give a costume away. A flashlit night clip, 11 seconds long, with no scale reference and no continuous wide shot, is in the year 2026 one of the easiest things in the entire world to fake. I am not saying it is fake, I am saying that if someone set out to fake it, this is precisely what the result would look like. So where do I personally land on the clip itself? Somewhere uncomfortable and honest. I do not think this is the smoking gun. One short, processed, locationless clip never could be, no matter how good it looks. But I also cannot make the easy frames go away, the hand on the tree, the wrongness of those proportions. It sits in the place where the best of this evidence always sits, compelling enough that you cannot dismiss it, thin enough that you cannot stand on it. You are going to have to look at it and decide for yourself, and I would genuinely like to hear where you come down. The title of this video says he found footage again, and I owe you an explanation of that word because it is doing a lot of work. This clip did not arrive in a vacuum. It is the clearest thing he ever captured, but it is the latest in a long line of moments, most of which were nothing. He has been running cameras on the same ground for years, and for most of that time, what he got back was the ordinary parade of the woods. Deer. A bear now and then, branches moving in the wind and tripping the sensor at 3 a.m. The boredom of the trail camera hobby is the part nobody films. But every so often, he told me, he got something at the edges, a shape too big at the corner of the frame. a pale smear that the camera caught for a single frame and then lost. A crossing, always at the same handful of spots, always at the same slice of the night, in that uncertain hour after the light is fully gone, but before the deep middle of the dark. It took him a long time, by his own account, to stop explaining these away. He is not a man who wanted to believe. He is a man who got tired of pretending he did not see a pattern. He described the slow process of it to me once, and it is the most convincing thing in all of our correspondence, precisely because it is so undramatic. First, you assume it is a bear that stood up. Then it happens again somewhere a bear would not stand. Then you notice the timing is too regular, the same window night after night. Then you notice the crossing points are too consistent, the same few gaps in the tree line, used the way a person uses a doorway. He said the moment that broke him was not a clear photo at all. It was a stretch of weeks where he could predict roughly where and when the next blurred shape would appear. And he was right often enough that he could no longer call it coincidence. You do not get to predict a hallucination. You do not get to predict a hoax you are not running. And the pattern was the thing that changed everything for him. Because once he started really paying attention, he became convinced he was not looking at one animal that happened to wander through. He was looking at more than one. Different sizes, different builds, one noticeably larger and heavier than the rest, one that moved like something younger, a difference in the way the weight came down through the stride. The same routes used over and over, season after season, in a way that a transient animal does not do. He started to feel like he had stumbled onto not a sighting, but a place that something used, the way deer use a trail or geese use a flyway. And that is a very different and much heavier thing to carry. A single sighting you can file away as a strange night. A place that something returns to, generation after generation, asks you to believe in a population, in a breeding group, in a thing that has been doing this, undisturbed, for a very long time, a few ridges over from where the rest of us live our lives.
Here is what separates him from almost every account I get. He did not want to be believed. He spent years trying to talk himself out of it. The careful witness, the one with everything to lose and nothing to gain, is the one the whole field has always taken most seriously.
He is not the first person to describe a place in the woods that something uses. That is the part of this that reaches back much further than any trail camera. Across this continent, long before any of us were here with our cameras and our forums, the people who lived closest to these forests had names for the tall ones, who walked upright in the deep timber. Nation after nation, language after language, with no contact between many of them, you find the same figure, something man-shaped and hair-covered, taller and broader than a person, that keeps to the edges, that watches more than it is seen, that is treated less like a monster to be hunted and more like a neighbor to be respected and left alone. Some traditions describe it as a keeper of the wild places. Some describe it as dangerous if disrespected. Almost all of them describe the same physical thing, and almost all of them describe the same behavior. It avoids us, it watches, it moves through. What gets me about the old accounts is not the existence of a legend. Every culture has its monsters, and a skeptic is right to point out that a scary story in the woods is about the most universal thing a human being produces. What gets me is the specificity and the overlap between groups that had no way of comparing notes. The same low-set head with almost no neck, the same disproportionately long arms, the same description of a thing that stands and watches from a tree line rather than charging or fleeing. The same insistence again and again that you do not bother it and it does not bother you. That is a very particular profile to arrive at independently over and over across thousands of miles. And then you layer on a couple of centuries of settler accounts, trappers and loggers and homesteaders, people with no shared folklore and often no shared language, reporting the very same creature. The wide shoulders, the low-set head, the long arms, the smell sometimes, that sour, musky reek that witnesses describe so consistently it has become a cliché of the field. The uncanny sense of being watched from a tree line. The footprints far too large and too human in shape to belong to a bear, with a flexibility in the middle of the foot that a bear track simply does not have. The reports pile up across the 19th and 20th centuries from people who, by and large, had nothing to gain and a fair amount of standing to lose by telling them. Now, a skeptic will tell you fairly that humans are pattern-making animals who see faces in clouds and giants in the dark, and that a shared story does not make a shared creature. They will tell you that stories travel, that the modern image of Bigfoot has been so thoroughly absorbed into the culture that no witness today comes to an encounter with a blank mind, and that expectation shapes memory more powerfully than any of us like to admit. That is all true, and I am not going to pretend it is not. Contamination is real. Once a story is famous enough, it starts manufacturing its own witnesses. But here's the thing I keep turning over. The behavior in those old accounts is the same behavior in his clip. The watching, the deliberate route, the hand on the tree, the passing through of something that is aware of you and simply chooses not to engage. When the description from a frightened homesteader 200 years ago matches the 11 seconds on a memory card in 2026, that consistency is its own kind of evidence. It does not prove the creature. A consistent story can be a consistent error. But it is a strange thing to explain away, and I notice that the people most eager to explain it away have usually spent the least time actually sitting with how much of it there is. And this is where his account stops being a collection of sightings and turns into something that genuinely unsettles me. Because the most important thing he told me was not that they were there. It was that they were changing. Over the years he watched, he said they got less careful. That was the word he used. Less careful. In the early footage, the crossings were deep in the night, fast, always at maximum distance from the camera, always at the tree line. As time went on, he said, the passes came earlier, closer to the edge of daylight. They came nearer to the camera rather than skirting it. They reacted less to the equipment, as if the gear had stopped registering as a threat, or as if something else had pushed their caution down the list of their concerns. The clip you are looking at, the slow walk, the unbothered pass, the hand on the tree, is, by his account, the clearest example of that change. This is not an animal sneaking through. This is an animal that has stopped bothering to sneak. He had his theories about why, and he offered them as theories, not facts, which is one of the reasons I trusted him. Maybe their range was being squeezed, he said, and they were being forced to use ground closer to people than they would choose to. Maybe a hard season had moved them. Maybe a food source had shifted. Or maybe, and this is the one he kept circling back to, something was changing that he could not name, and the boldness was a symptom of it rather than the thing itself. He told me about other things too, things I have gone back and forth on, whether to even include, because they are the parts that sound the most like folklore and the parts that are easiest to fake. He said he had found arrangements in the timber, branches stacked and leaned in ways the wind does not do, saplings twisted over and broken at a height that would take real strength and real reach, lines of debris that seemed to mark something, a boundary or a route, that he learned to read over time. I want to be clear that this is his interpretation. A broken tree is just a broken tree until a human mind decides it is a sign, and the woods are full of accidents that look like intention if you want them to. But he was adamant that the arrangements clustered near the crossings and that he started to find them in places he had not before, as if whatever made them was extending its territory, marking ground it had not bothered to mark in the years prior. More activity, more boldness, more signs, all of it pointing the same direction. And here is why I cannot dismiss it as one man's imagination running ahead of him. Because this past spring, far away from wherever he is, something happened in Ohio that has the entire community arguing. In early March of 2026, in the wooded country of Portage County, southeast of Cleveland, reports started coming in. Not one, a cluster. The Bigfoot Society, a podcast and research community with hundreds of thousands of members, logged around 8 separate sightings between March 6th and March 10th in towns like Mantua, Garrettsville, Streetsboro, and Newton Township. Witnesses described tall, hair-covered, bipedal figures, somewhere between 6 and 10 feet, dark brown to black, moving through the woods, crossing rural roads, setting dogs into fits of fear. One report on a hiking trail described a roughly 10-foot figure with an odd, stilt-like walk and a heavy musk. The host of that community, a researcher named Jeremiah Byron, said something that stuck with me. He said it is normal to have Bigfoot sightings scattered all over the country, but it is not normal to have this many in one small area in a handful of days, and that nothing like it had been documented in that region since the late 1970s. And the researchers tracking it noticed the same thing my correspondent had noticed on the other side of the country and on a smaller scale. The Ohio sightings seemed to follow a path, east-southeast, valley to valley, as if something were on the move. The word that got used, half seriously, was migration. A herd on the move after a hard winter. More than one animal, the heights and colors too varied to be a single individual, traveling a corridor through the rural interior. Look at the specifics of what the Ohio witnesses described, because they rhyme with his account in ways that are hard to ignore. The encounters happen along a wooded greenway, a corridor of timber connecting a string of small towns through rural country, exactly the kind of edge habitat where forest meets the thin margins of human settlement. The figures were described crossing roads, moving through trees at the edges of properties, close enough that people walking dogs at 4 a.m. got a good frightening look. That is bold behavior. That's not a creature keeping to the deep backcountry where nobody goes. That is a creature using the seams, the in-between places, the same shift toward human edges that he had been documenting for years, before any of this hit the news. One witness even described that odd stilt-like gait and the heavy musk, and I think about the way the thing in his clip moves, that long, rolling, deliberate stride, and I cannot help connecting them even as I tell myself not to. Now I'm going to be straight with you, because the easy thing would be to leave the Ohio story sitting there glowing and let you draw the scary conclusion for me. The honest version has caveats. Not one of those 8 Ohio sightings produced a photograph, a track cast that survived scrutiny, or a body. The local sheriff's office checked its calls and found trespassing complaints and false alarms, but nothing logged as a creature. And the sheriff himself treated the whole thing as a joke online, posting gag images of the creature in handcuffs, even as he admitted his office took real, frightened calls from residents who were not laughing at all. And the skeptics have a genuinely strong point that I will not wave away. The folklorist Benjamin Radford put it about as sharply as it can be put. In an age when every single person is carrying a high-resolution camera in their pocket, at some point a creature's luck has to run out. The absence of one clean image after all this time and all these phones is itself a piece of evidence, and an uncomfortable one. A wave of sightings that produces a wave of stories, and not a single clear photograph is exactly what you would expect if the cause were excitement and suggestion rather than a population of animals. So hold both of those things in your head at once, because that is the only honest way to carry this. It is possible that nothing is changing at all, and that what looks like a wave is just more cameras, more phones, more people primed by the stories to interpret a shadow as a Sasquatch. And it is also possible that two people who have never met, one running quiet cameras in the mountains for years, and one community of witnesses in an Ohio spring, noticed the same real thing at the same time. Boulder movement, closer passes, animals on the move, something shifting. Where do I personally come down on the changing behavior idea? It is the most fascinating thing he ever told me and the least provable, and I think you have to be honest that those two facts are related. A claim about a slow change in behavior observed by one man over years in a place he will not name is almost impossible to test. I cannot stand behind it as fact, but I cannot make the Ohio flap line up with his account as neatly as it does and feel nothing. I feel something. I just refuse to call that feeling proof. Which brings me to the last real conversation we had, and the reason this video has the ending it has. For years, the entire foundation of how he operated was distance. He watched from far away. He let the cameras do the watching for him. He was proud of that, in a quiet way. He used to say that the reason he had seen as much as he had was precisely that he had never pushed, never pressured them, never tried to close the gap. He believed they tolerated his cameras because the cameras did not chase. He thought of himself, I think, as a respectful guest on ground that was not his. And then, in the last stretch of our correspondence, that changed. The boldness he had been documenting started to work on him in reverse. If they were coming closer, he reasoned, then maybe the thing he had always told himself was impossible was actually within reach. He had a belief built up over years of watching the routes about where they went when they were not crossing his cameras. Up higher into the mountains to some place he thought of as where they sheltered, and he decided he was going to find it. He was not reckless about it, or at least he did not present it that way to me. He framed it as observation, not confrontation. He talked about going carefully, about keeping his distance even as he closed in, about wanting only to confirm the place existed and to understand it, not to disturb whatever used it. He used the word careful more than once. I remember that clearly because I've gone back and reread those messages more times than I would like to admit, and the word careful is in them. And it has started to feel less like reassurance and more like the thing people say right before the thing they cannot take back. Because here is what you already know, sitting where you are sitting. You know how this part of the story is shaped. A man spends years building a careful, respectful distance from something large and powerful and barely understood. And then, at the very moment that thing seems to be growing bolder, he decides to give up the one thing that kept him safe, the distance, and walk toward it. He told me he would be careful. He told me he would write when he got back. I tried, in my own quiet way, to talk him down from it. Not hard, because it was not my place, and because part of me, the part that runs a channel like this, wanted to know what he would find as badly as he did. But I told him the obvious thing, that the entire reason he had gotten as far as he had was the distance. That whatever tolerance these animals showed his cameras was a tolerance for being watched, not for being followed. That a creature growing bolder is not the same as a creature growing safer, and that the two might in fact be opposites. He heard me. He did not disagree exactly. He just said that he had spent his whole life being careful and that he was getting older, and that he did not want to die having watched something extraordinary from a safe distance for years without ever once trying to truly see it. I did not have an answer for that. I am not sure there is one. He did not write when he got back. It has been 3 weeks. The last substantial message was the one laying out the plan, the where and the why and the careful. After that, the thread that had been alive for so long simply went quiet. I have sent follow-ups. a few of them. I've tried to keep them light, the way you do when you're telling yourself there's nothing wrong, just checking in, hope the trip went well, curious what you found, nothing comes back. The messages sit there, unanswered, and every day that passes makes the silence a little louder. And I have to be honest with you about the limits of what I know, because the temptation here, the thing that would make for a better story and a worse truth, is to tell you something happened to him. I do not know that. I want to say that clearly. He may be completely fine. He may be off-grid for reasons that have nothing to do with any of this. He may have thought better of the whole thing, decided he had said too much to a stranger on the internet, and pulled back to protect himself. People go quiet for 100 ordinary reasons. I'm not going to stand here and tell you a man is in trouble because he stopped answering his email. That would be a lie dressed up as concern. But I am also not going to pretend the shape of it does not bother me, because strip away the speculation and look only at what I can actually account for. A careful man. Years of watching from a safe distance. A documented sense that the thing he watched was growing bolder. A stated decision to abandon his distance and go find where it lives. And then silence, starting from the moment he went to do it. I cannot tell you what happened in that gap. I can only tell you that the gap is there, and that I check for his name in my inbox every single morning. There's a specific kind of unease that comes from an unanswered message, and anyone who has waited on one knows it. At first you barely notice. Then you start telling yourself the ordinary stories, the bad signal, the busy life, the second thoughts. And then, somewhere in the third week, the ordinary stories stop being quite enough to cover the silence, and you find yourself doing the thing I have been doing, which is rereading old messages looking for a clue you missed the first time. I have not found one. The last message is calm, it is careful. It is a man telling a friend he is about to go do a thing he has wanted to do for years, and that he will be in touch when it is done. There is nothing ominous in it at all, and that is somehow the most ominous part. He did not sound like a man walking into something. He sounded like a man certain he was coming back. If you are watching this and you run cameras in high country and any of it sounds familiar, the roots, the boldness, the structures, the feeling of a place that something uses, I want to hear from you in the comments, not for the views, because there is a chance, however small, that someone out there recognizes this, and I would rather know than wonder. And now I have to do the thing this channel always does, the thing that I think is the only reason any of this is worth your time. I have to make the strongest possible case against everything I just told you, so here it is with no hedging. There is a version of this where none of it is real. In that version, a man invented a compelling correspondent, brightened a clip of a friend in a good suit, fed me exactly the kind of careful, reluctant, credible-sounding details that someone who understands this community knows will land, and then ended the whole thing on a disappearance. Because a disappearance is the single most powerful ending a story like this can have. Think about how clean it is. The anonymity means nothing can be checked. The refusal to name a location means nothing can be visited. The processed footage means nothing can be analyzed. The silence at the end means the story never has to resolve, never has to deliver the body or the proof that would expose it. If you set out to build an unfalsifiable Bigfoot story, you would build exactly this one. And there is no body, there is no specimen, there is no clean photograph, there is no GPS pin, no verifiable witness, no second source. There's a clip I cannot stand behind and a silence I cannot explain. I have to sit in that. So do you. That is the cost of being honest about this stuff instead of just selling it. And I want to extend the skeptic the courtesy of his strongest argument, not his weakest. The strongest case against all of this is not that any one detail is wrong, it is that the whole structure of the story is built perfectly to resist being checked. Real evidence invites scrutiny. It comes with a place you can go, a name you can call, a file you can hand to someone who knows more than you do. This comes with none of that, and every missing piece is explained by a reason that also happens to make verification impossible. Why no location? To protect him? Why no name? To protect him. Why is the footage processed? Because the original was too dark. Why did it end? Because he disappeared. Each answer is individually reasonable. Stacked together, they form a story that can never be falsified and never be confirmed, which is exactly the property a fabrication would need to survive contact with someone like me, whose entire job on this channel is to try to knock these things down. A skeptic would say that is not a coincidence. A skeptic would say that is the design. And yet, here's the thing the skeptical case cannot quite kill. The people the field has always taken most seriously are not the showmen. They are the quiet ones, the ones with something to lose, the ones who do not want the attention, who try to talk themselves out of it, who share what they have reluctantly and then go quiet rather than ride it for everything it is worth. That is the entire profile of the man who sent me these 11 seconds. So which is he? The careful, credible witness whose very caution makes him believable? Or someone who understood better than any showman that the most convincing version of this story is the one told by a man who does not seem to want to tell it at all? I genuinely do not know. And I think anyone who tells you they are certain in either direction is selling you something. So where does that leave us? It leaves us with 11 seconds of footage that is compelling and unprovable. It leaves us with a claim about changing behavior that is fascinating and untestable, and an Ohio spring that lines up with that claim in a way that is either meaningful or a trick of timing. And it leaves us with a man who went quiet at the worst possible moment to go quiet. Here is where I personally land, and I want to be clear that this is a position, not a verdict, and I would honestly like to be argued out of it. I do not think that clip is proof of anything. I do not think it could be. But I do not think the man who sent it to me was lying either. I think he saw something real over a long time, and I think it got bolder, and I think it pulled him in, the way the unknown always pulls in the people who get too close to it. Whether what pulled him in was a creature or his own conviction, I cannot say. I'm not sure those are even as different as we like to pretend. And maybe that is the real shape of every story like this one, underneath the footage and the legends and the flap in Ohio. Maybe what we are really watching is what happens to a certain kind of person when they spend long enough at the edge of the known. He started out wanting to document something. He ended up needing to reach it. The distance that kept him safe became the thing he could no longer tolerate. I do not think that is a Bigfoot phenomenon. I think that is a human one, and I think it is older than any legend. The pull toward the thing in the dark is the same pull that has always sent people over the next ridge and out past the edge of the map. And most of them came back, and some of them did not, and the ones who did not left exactly this kind of silence behind them. I keep the thread open. I have not archived it, have not let it drop down the inbox to where I would stop seeing it. It sits there at the top, and I look at it, and every time I watch those 11 seconds, the slow walk, the long arm reaching out, the hand against the tree, I find myself stuck on the same thought. The last thing he ever told me was that he was going to go and find where it lives, and I do not know if he found it. I only know that he has not come back to tell me, and that somewhere out there on a memory card or in a place he would not name, the rest of this story is still sitting in the dark, waiting for someone to walk far enough in to find it.
If you want more of these, subscribe and stay close. And tell me honestly in the comments, if you were him, do you take the walk into the mountains? Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.